Hi, Gemma.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. So we're on just a little bit early. Hey, everyone. We see there are some people. Yeah. Oh my gosh. People from Taiwan and Melbourne, LA, Holland, Portugal. Holy cow. Queensland,
I can
Melbourne,
see someone
also
from
another one.
Redfern. That's just around the corner from me.
Oh, great. Yeah, so before we get started, guys, we only have maybe 1/3 of the people who registered for the event. So if you can do me a favor and use the share button underneath, let everyone know before we begin that we're getting started. And then while we're waiting, let us know in the chat bar where you're tuning in from. Terry Stone is on. She's from California. She's from Adobe. Do you know Terry?
Yeah, I think I know that. I know that name. I feel like maybe I haven't met her in person, but I've heard her voice on the phone.
Oh, good. She's from Adobe Create.
Oh, there we go. That's correct, she said. Awesome.
And I saw that Matthew and Sina has already asked a question. So,
oh, yes.
Great.
Cool. I think that was in my questions too.
It's wonderful to see everyone tuning in. I'm sorry if you're missing out on any sleep during this time because I'm broadcasting from Los Angeles and Gemma is from her studio in Sydney, and I'm sure there's time in between there. Got a shout out for the spew bag challenge. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Yay, Teresa from Monotype is here. Excellent. Hello from Boston. Okay, so again, we just are waiting for people to fill up. I see that the room is filling up. Please share out the event. Let everyone know that we are starting and that you're jumping on and involving. So, hey, Jasmine has a comment for you. I don't know if you can see it, Gemma.
Oh, yes, I can. Oh, the Melbourne Lettering Club. I am in Melbourne often, so next time I'm there, I will definitely come and try and meet up. That would be cool.
Very cool. Okay, so we have a little bit of a different format for you guys today. Gemma will be doing a little presentation, but afterwards we have a ton of questions for you. Now, I know you have questions for Gemma, and they're underneath. While we are, again, waiting for people to come in, I put in a little poll underneath. So if you click on the polls tab underneath, we asked, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of writing, design, lettering, and typography? So far, 3 says optimistic. I guess this is just our audience, right? We'll see if anyone is pessimistic, but we would love for you to let us know underneath. Also, we will be answering questions, but only the top voted ones. So if possible, go through the questions underneath and vote up the ones that you want to know the answer to. And then when we have time at the end, then Gemma will be answering them. Holy cow, it's starting to fill up. Okay, great. Well, Gemma, thank you again for joining us. Let me just let everyone know today we are on with Gemma O'Brien, and welcome to Typography Dojo. This is the place where we learn from our type and typography masters. I am your host, Rachel Elnar. I'm also the producer at TypeEd, Typography Education Program here in Los Angeles. And of course, today we are joined by the amazing Gemma O'Brien. She's a lettering artist and type muralist, and she's calling in today from her studio in Sydney, Australia. Hello.
Hello.
Now it's 11 a.m. there, right?
It is. It's a very reasonable hour.
Yeah. Did you get anything done today?
I've got many things to do after this,
yes.
but yeah.
Excellent. Well, let's jump in. So did you want to start with your presentation, Gemma?
Sure.
Great. Excellent.
Cool. So I'm already screen sharing? No,
Okay.
I'm going to screen share.
So
okay, everybody. Okay, awesome. Here we go.
Okay, guys, everyone pay attention because there's going to be a quiz afterwards, okay?
Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, yes from you. Okay, cool. So thanks for coming, everyone. The idea behind this talk is a little bit of me telling my story of how I got started and how I've kind of worked in the industry of typography over the last 5 to 10 years. And then at the end, as Rachel said, we're going to have a bit of a discussion about this idea, the future of typography is human. Now, this sentence, like when I came up with this at the beginning of the year, I had a gut feeling. I'm like, I want to do a talk. I want to do some research around the future of typography, lettering, and writing. And I had a gut feeling that maybe it would be human. Since coming up with this idea, I've thought that's absolutely ridiculous. Everything's being digitized. The more we communicate, it's happening on our screens. You know, the less and less human components are involved in the creation of lettering in the way that we read each and every day. But there have been a huge number of trends back towards these kind of old school ways: calligraphy, sign painting, letterpress printing, and I've seen a lot of them happen in my career. So basically, I want to talk about these ideas, how they've kind of come to me in the course of my work, and want to hear what you think. So this is my studio upstairs. This is like a few flights of stairs just up there. And I'm currently working in one of the other rooms in my house while we have a transition period in the house. But I'm in Sydney, in Redfern, in Sydney, Australia. And as Rachel said, you know, the kind of work I do ranges from commercial projects, custom lettering, sometimes working with existing fonts and adding illustration, creating pieces for the advertising industry, personal projects, and everything in between. So it all started for me. I was always very creative. This is one of my earliest typography explorations. I created some lettering for Violet's party. This was in primary school.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
See the letter spacing in Violet's is a little tight, but I still got a principal's award, which is awesome. So I was always very creative from a young age. But when I went through school, I got good marks and I felt pressure to do a smart career. So I ended up going to law school. And after a year, I realized that law school was definitely not for me. So I dropped out, and I think deep down I probably wanted to study art, but design was, you know, a more feasible career option. So I dropped out of law school, moved to Sydney, and enrolled in a design degree. And it was in the first year of this design degree that I had an opportunity to set type by hand in the letterpress studio. Now, I don't know how many of you remember the early stages of your typography education, but for me, before the letterpress studio, I actually found it really boring. You know, the way, I mean, maybe it was just the teachers that I had, but it seemed to me working purely on the computer, it was very rule-based. I just couldn't really connect. So being able to go into the letterpress studio, and suddenly there was, you know, a physical letter, a physical space, all the rules made sense, and it was tangible and you could touch it, and I just basically fell in love. So from that point forward, I kind of became obsessed with lettering and typography, researching it. And what I realized was that here is where I was born in 1997. I kind of created design, and my interest has happened over the course of my lifetime in this period of extreme change. You know, we've entered this digital revolution. Our lives have been changed by these big tech companies. The way that we communicate changes, and when language changes, so does typography. And so it's almost like in this amazing like flurry of things happening that my career has taken its path. So I've kind of had a crossover between, you know, having a little bit of pre-internet, pre-computer time, and then a lot of, you know, the real fast-moving stuff. So I did what everyone in 2009 did, was I started a blogger called For the Love of Type. Now, at this point, I think I'm going to answer one of the questions that was in the question list before I started, which was about the terminology surrounding, you know, type, and if I'm saying the future of typography is human. Obviously, many of you know working in the industry, the difference between typography and lettering and calligraphy. And when I started my blog For the Love of Type, when I was just a student, I remember thinking, like, this is catchy, this is short. And I started to get emails from a lot of, you know, very high up design people around the world saying, well, Gemma, technically your blog features a lot of lettering, so it should be For the Love of Lettering. And so that was my first experience with, like, you know, this terminology debate. And of course, I think it's really important to, you know, correct people, you know, inform people when, you know, people often, when I will post a piece of hand lettering or a mural and they'll say nice font. And I think it's really important to explain those differences. But for me, for this debate, for the idea, I use the word type and typography as an umbrella term to incorporate, you know, all forms of written communication happening now. Otherwise, it's like, what's the future of lettering and calligraphy and writing? And, you know, so it's just more of it for ease of, you know, having the discussion, but I'm including all of these areas. So I started a blog, and it was, this is where I took on the persona Mrs. Eves, like the font. And it was just really a place for me to channel my interest in typography and lettering. I would take photos of signage on the street. This is in San Francisco. I just saw it again a couple of weeks ago, this shaved V out of a dog in Venice Beach.
Oh my.
This is just this really weird thing that I found on the street quite recently. Fee wine from a restaurant. I assume it's supposed to say free wine, but I love this because it's so weird and it's so real. Like, there is nothing really designed about this. Like, I don't think this is like for a pop-up wine bar. This isn't like, you know, some campaign, but this is the kind of thing that I would notice in the world that was completely undesigned, but it's very human. You know, it's very real. It's not, you know, it's considered in a sense, but so just keep this in mind for future. So I did this project where some of you may see this. I wrote all over my body in a Sharpie pen for this Right Here, Right Now anti-graffiti campaign project for my graphics assignment. I put the process video online, and this spotted the attention of Jürgen Siebert down there from Font Shop. And I got an email one day from a random German guy saying, Gemma, look, I thought you might be interested in reading this blog post that's been written about you and your work. It's called Amateur Designer and Have Sex with Buchstaben, which translates to Amateur Designer Has Sex with Letters. So the article went on to be like, you know, who is this Mrs. Eves? Is she, you know, is she a student? Is she a designer? All her work's derivative. It's ripping off Stefan Sagmeister. So it was basically very like critical. And to be honest, you know, there was some truth in it, I think. But as a, you know, 20-year-old design student, I was shocked that, you know, someone other than my mum was reading my blog, let alone someone who's writing for Font Blogger, this big design blog in Germany. So this kind of kickstarted my career in the sense that a lot of people actually wrote back on this blog post and said, oh, you know, maybe she's doing something interesting, maybe just wait and see, you know, just basically giving me the benefit of the doubt. So I got an email from Jürgen Siebert a few months later asking me to come and speak at Typo Berlin. So this was back in 2009. And it was the first time I'd ever done, you know, a conference talk. I didn't really have any experience or any professional work to show. So I just talked about my passion for typography and interviewed some other people working in the field in Australia as well and showed their kind of response. So after I came back from that kind of big break in the type world, I worked in a few other kind of design studios, Animal Logic and Fuel VFX, working more in an art direction capacity, doing, you know, design for motion graphics and 3D. And by the time I finished working in the industry, I came out and it was 2012. So between 2008 and 2009, when I started my design blog, only 3 years had passed. And this is when I wanted to go back into freelancing and working in lettering and typography again. But so much had changed in such a short amount of time. Typography was suddenly cool. Kanye West was tweeting about fonts. Like, it was just this, it had blown up in such a short space of time. And we're, as I said before, at this peak of visual communication when we have this new whole vocabulary of emojis. There was this big trend towards inspirational quotes, which is, you know, comes in these forms of, you know, the democratization of design, where people can, like, you know, set these little inspirational quotes and share them, and you know, just this influx of positive words through forms of lettering and type. Calligraphers, people like Seb Lester's designers, becoming celebrities in themselves. 1 million Instagram followers.
Wow.
What is, like, and I was thinking about this, and it's like, his work is amazing. I remember seeing his work when I first started getting into design. But there's something about, like, watching live calligraphy that you just can't take your eyes away. And that's something I'm curious to hear. Like, what do you think the reason is? That because, you know, this was once a thing that everybody did and now it's so digital that it's just amazing, we're in awe of the human ability? Or is it something else? I'm interested to hear a bit later about that. So in the midst of, like, this new technology, we have 3D pens. This is a 3D pen drawing. I think it's called the Lix pen. We've got robots. This is a robot that's writing out the Bible in perfect calligraphy there. So in the midst of all this new technology, this video went viral. I saw it on, I don't know if anyone's seen this. It's just a couple of guys. This is a still, it's not a video, sorry. But it's basically a couple of guys just painting bus stop on the road. And it's, you know, it's just their job. It's not like, it's amazing. And people were in awe of this. And so I was like, what is it about, you know, obviously there's this amazing skill in the ability and the precision of just working with this, you know, single thing to draw a letter. But what is it about that this is so appealing? And I started to think that maybe it is because it's just so real. It's not set up in any way. So this idea of authenticity started to kind of like filter into my thinking in terms of design. And it also started to come through in the briefs that I was getting as I started to work as a commercial letterer. So, you know, as I said before, there was these inspirational quotes, customized lettering. You know, what ways can you make the lettering or typography speak beyond the ways that you can work with just the font? Customization, creating something completely unique. So many magazines and brands wanted to have the, you know, this phrase look like a logo in itself, not just, you know, not just to be set in a single way. There was the grand chalk trend of 2013. You guys definitely saw this. Off the back of, you know, Dana Tanamachi's beautiful big chalk murals, I started to get all of these chalk lettering briefs. And it was just a huge trend. And I started to think, like, what is it about this that is so appealing? Why is it that it's just like, you know, something that's so simple, a chalk-like effect? Is it the fact that you can see the the chalk strokes in the final piece? Is it that it feels a little bit more human? Letterpress trend, as I mentioned before, sign painting. And so for me, in the midst of kind of seeing these trends happen and knowing that I loved to work by hand and to kind of combine the analog and the digital, I wanted to find a way that it wasn't going to be so much like getting sucked away in these trends for my own work. So for me, it became about embracing the form and the process, so embedding myself in what I really loved, which was combining lettering and illustration. So there was this drawing side of my work, which was heavily influenced by like the way that I started in design, which was drawing shapes and outlines. And then the other part of it was writing, which will come up in a little bit in a minute. So I really started to, you know, just focus on ways to find, you know, how can I make the lettering speak beyond just the words itself and combine illustration elements, sometimes working with existing fonts and bringing out the details, incorporating illustrated features and elements. This was for the Bonnaroo Music Festival, using an existing font and then bringing the design elements around it. This was one of the very earliest illustrated lettering pieces I did. But really just kind of like embedding myself in the process and like, you know, taking it away from the screen to work by hand in pen, watercolor. This was for the Australian Geographic 30 Years of Conservation. And this came out in March for Playboy magazine. And that was for the new Harry Potter movie. So the one side of it was really about drawing for me. And then I started to feel like, what's a way that I can still work within the realms of typography, but have something that's faster, that has more vitality, that, you know, you can see, you know, this idea of authenticity in a single stroke. Like, how can you see the speed at which it was written? And I loved the work of Luca Barcelona. I'd seen so much of his calligraphy. And so I just started to go to the art store and buy brush pens and just basically taught myself a style of brush lettering that's now become a big part of my practice. But initially it was really just about finding brushes, experimenting, getting quills. I had never had any formal training in calligraphy. So a lot of the time it was like, I've got this tool, how can I use it in a different way to make something that looks interesting and human, but maybe not as formal and perfect as the traditional styles of calligraphy. This is custom cut balsa wood there and the bee and some twigs. So this is sometimes in my lettering workshops, incorporating these processes as well. So I started to experiment a lot with this brush lettering. And as I said, now it's become a staple of my design process. And this particular logo mark for Angus and Julia Stone was one where I really started to notice this idea of like it having mistakes or feeling more human, because I sent through the initial designs and Julia from Angus and Julia Stone, I said, these are really rough, choose the one you like and I'll refine it. And to me, refine it meant, like you can see on the U, the L and the I there, you know, the angle was a little bit off. I wanted them to be perfect. And so I sent her the revised version, which from my, you know, typographic mind was really perfect. And she said, no, Gemma, I really like the previous version because it just feels it's a little bit more handwritten, a bit more real. And I realized that there has to be this balance, you know, like between being a designer and wanting it to be perfect. And sometimes there being a value, and depending on what the field that you're designing for, sometimes there is value in it just being a little bit not perfect. And there it was in neon.
Oh, wow.
Everything looks good in neon. You can't even see things that I didn't like typographically. Again, this was for Troy Sivan's EP, just working with a whole variety of different folded pens, brush pens. And at the beginning, lots of people are often asking, what did you use for this? And the way that I started was by just literally buying lots of things and experimenting and seeing what worked for me. And so what this kind of led to, this kind of brush style, was this big commission by Kieran Sider to hand paint 37 billboards for their new the cider which was coming into town. So it started off with these balsa wood experiments, but then I realized when I had to paint 37, there was no way that you could kind of design a unique style that was going to carry across from scratch. So what we ended up doing was using Sarah script as the base, and then I used a single brush to do each stroke and hand painted them all. I think it was over the course of 4 nights. So these were installed across Sydney and I think maybe in Australia as well. So it was also the first time there was this component within a job of the behind the scenes making up part of the campaign. And that's something else I'm curious to hear of any designers working in the field. How many of the projects that you're working on now, it's like, well, we want the final art, but we also would love some behind the scenes pictures or a social component, or, you know, to see the artist embedded in the process, which just adds this, like, you know, as soon as the artist's there, it's a little bit more authentic. You know, it's the real deal because you can see how it was created. So this working at a large scale on that kind of segued me into this mural phase. So the murals have been like the chalk trend, the brush type trend, and this murals has been like the last year for me. And I've seen it on social media and other people's work. It's happening everywhere. So I think there is something that's really appealing about this sense of scale. You know, as soon as you take something that you've done really small and blown it up, it has just this importance that, you know, in the way that advertising and billboards kind of, you know, demands your attention. As soon as you take these lettering and typography, I just always loved the scale of an installation in a gallery like this. So I started to work a lot larger in Sharpies. This was in Powder Mountain. If you ever go to Summit, you can see the original Fearless piece there. And also starting to do a lot of murals that were temporary. So it was all about the experience. So this one for Volcom was, it was only up for 1 night for an event and then it was painted white. So I really liked this idea of kind of creating an experience through an installation style of mural painting, where you kind of had to be there for the moment and then it was gone. And I think that kind of speaks to this digital age where we live in, where everything happens in your phone. So almost being in a room and having an experience creates a stronger memory than if you never will see it ever again. And this kind of got translated across to a lot of brands. Optus commissioned me among, I think there was 4 other artists, to take their branding and bring it to life through a live installation in the store, and again with Officeworks. So starting to see these like different ways of embedding the artist into the process, into different brand campaigns as well. So what I like to do is to, in amongst, you know, probably 80% of my work this year has been commercial work. So to try and have that space to experiment and to do something that's completely different, I need to kind of do an exhibition style show. So this was my last one in Sydney last year, and just trying to find ways to push that style onto this larger scale and create this, as I said before, a fleeting experience that's, you know, a big typographic installation. So this was in China Heights in Sydney. And then most recently, I did a similar style of installation show in Laguna Beach. I don't know if there was anyone in Laguna in the chat field, but I had lots of amazing helpers from the LCAD Design School with this. And this was up for a month. And the concept behind this was all about, you know, this digital language that we write and we read every day. This is re-establishing lost connection wrapped around the pole. Prove you're human from the bot capture request. And, you know, just the various iterations of okay every day. And I liked the way that maybe that these could kind of speak to something that was like beyond just the, you know, throwaway language, something deeper about, like, you know, human desire, like prove you're human. Like, that's such an amazing sentence. It's like, what's your legacy? What are we here for? Like, show me that you're a human. And I think that kind of embodies a lot of the thinking around what I'm curious about lettering and language, and the way that, you know, it can speak to time and culture and place, and that this will continue to change as we move into the future. And so the last project I'm going to show you, many people have seen, some already did a shout out to it, was the spew bag challenge. So if you hadn't already seen this, it started with one sick bag when I was flying to Wellington in New Zealand about 3 or 4 years ago, and I just wrote fully sick on the sick bag. And then it became, every time I would fly, I would think of a new puke pun and draw it on the sick bag. So there was Queasy Lover, Bile High Club, License to Ill, Daft Punk. This was when Daft Punk brought out their new album, so they started to get like pop culture references. Land of the Rising Lunch was when I went to Japan. So it kind of became this thing I would do every time I flew, and I changed my pseudonym from Mrs. Eves to Mrs. Heaves. And I started to sign them off with the hashtag SpewBag Challenge and encourage other people to think of a puke pun, draw it in the duration of the flight, and leave it in the seat for the person who's coming on the flight next. So I think if you look on the hashtag now on Instagram, there's like 1,000 entries from all around the world, which is really amazing. It's become something in itself. So it went on for about a year, and I decided that I would start to keep the bags because I'd been leaving them in the seats, and finally have an exhibition. 50 Shades of Spray, this one I gave to my mum as a gift. Chuck Norris needed no alteration. He was good as is. Alice in Chunderland, Bigger Than Ben Hurl. I think Ben Hurl just came out in a movie. I should recycle this one again. Lana Del Spray, Not That Kind of Hurl. And then the last one that I do, it's probably been a year since I've done it now, Nausea, which I was like wanting to use that for so long. So it was the first time in color as well. So I ended up having an exhibition framing all the sick bags. I think they've all sold. There's maybe 2 floating around at different galleries. And there were a few extras just for the show, Rage Against the Cuisine, Eat, Spray, Love. And yeah, it really just came out of, this side project. But I think in terms of this bigger picture of like, authenticity and connection, for some reason this project connected with so many people, and I never expected that starting out, but I just like the idea that it's something so that everyone experiences when they fly. So to be able to connect in that way and make it something funny was something that was really fun. So you can see them all at spewbagchallenge.tumblr.com. And that's the end of my presentation of kind of how I got started. I guess also a bit of context of where I'm coming from in terms of my thinking about the future of typography is human. So I'm happy to like throw it over to you guys now to have a bit of a discussion. But before I do, there's just one quote I wanted to show you. So when I started seeking input from the design community and different ideas about this idea, I emailed a few thinkers about this statement, the future of typography is human. So just to get like a one sentence. So if you do like have a response to this, like an instinctual response, like, no, Gemma, that's ridiculous. The future of typography is digital. Then like I would love to have like little one-liners to include in my research. But I got this great one from Stephen Heller. He said, typography may be the only applied art that changes but stays the same. Designs change, but the fundamental structure of letters do not. Typography requires different skills and technologies, but the purpose has not changed. It is just like humans. We all have the same inner and outer parts, only we care for them differently each year, dress and ornament them differently each year, but our fundamental expression, and moreover, our purpose in life does not change. We are perhaps, as McLuhan said or thought, typographic men and women. And I love that. It's so awesome.
Great.
It's exactly kind of like where I'm thinking in terms of like, yes, you can have technology change, and yes, you can have the means of creation change, but deep down, what typography does is, communicate and connect and, has such an ability to transcend time or speak to a particular time and place and, speak to human experience. And I'm really interested in the future. How will that change? Will we value things differently in handwriting? And so I'm curious. Let's start the discussion now. Is there any, how do you want to do it, Rachel? Do you want to, I don't know if there's any questions popping out while this has been happening or...
There's a little bit in the chat bar, but it's mostly just comments on your presentation. Let's start with a couple questions. Let's do this as a group, guys. So we'll ask a question that Gemma has for you, and then just type it into the chat bar. We'll just do it, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully, Gemma, you can find all the answers afterwards. Okay, so number one question for you guys: are you studying or working in the field of design? How much of your process working with words is done digitally? Do you ever work by hand, and when? So basically, if you are working in the field of design, how much of your process is working with words? How much of your process working with words is done digitally? And do you ever work with hands? So if you guys can just type that into the chat bar, maybe we can get a live discussion going here. I'm just going to review. We'll see. I know everyone, it's a little slow for people to type, so apologies. So
that's okay. While people write, I will just kind of answer the question from my personal experience. But, I still use so much, of the planning stages on the computer. I'll like do Photoshop mock-ups, or I'll do layouts in Illustrator to see like how like type might fit. Then I'll move to working by hand. Then often I'll scan and go back onto the computer. So it's probably like, I'd say it's probably like 60-40 digital analog for me.
So you go back and forth.
Yeah, back and forth. Here's one from
Yes.
May. I'm a graphic designer and 60% of my type work is digital. I prefer to sketch on paper whenever possible. 80% digital.
Sherilyn says 100% digital. Personal sketches to digital. Morgan says just finished school. All work with type is digital. So my guess, when you guys are saying digital, you're probably using fonts on a daily basis. You're not necessarily crafting or modifying letter forms. You are just using the type, as we say here, out of the can. Let's see. Nelson says digital is lame. Love that. So Nikita says 90% hand-drawn. So that means, Nikita, are you doing a lot of hand lettering? Are you modifying by hand? Let's see. Most of my client work, Bernardo says most of my client work is more typesetting, layout base, sketch, and then mostly do digitally. I never vectorize my lettering. Really? That's interesting.
Cool.
Good. So you get.
The more I move on in my work, the less vectorizing I do. But that's because the clients often ask, if it's the brush style, they want like a layered PSD where it still has the texture, which often, is very difficult to translate into, the vector form. It's just nice to have that transparency still.
It really changes when you vectorize your hand drawing. Okay, so shall we go to the next question?
Sure.
Is everyone like filing their questions?
These are great.
Yes, thank you so much, guys. Our second question is the trend back to techniques such as calligraphy, letterpress printing, hand lettering, sign painting? Is it just a fad? Uh-oh.
And I think this is also similar to Matthew's comment in the topics, I think.
Okay, so before you answer that, before you, Gemma, answer that, let's see what everyone else says. If the trend back to techniques such as calligraphy, letterpress printing, hand lettering, sign painting, just a fad. So I always hear, there's a resurgence of, hand lettering. Is it just a fad? Is it going to fade away? Let's see. Messiah says possibly, but it's one we all need right now.
I like that. I think it's true.
Good. That's good.
Dave Coleman, I like this. I think the broader concepts are not a fad, but perhaps the styles within these disciplines can be faddish. I agree. I think it's like deep down, like, why is it popular right now? What makes a trend? And I think I thought about this with the chalk trend, was like, what is it? Is it because it's human? So then what's another way to, achieve the same goal, but with a different stylistic, approach?
Right. Interesting. Nelson says it's cool that painters sand over their artwork to give it that vintage look. That's true. I mean, sometimes things are too digital, and so we actually use techniques to make it more human, right?
And I think it's also another thing I started to realize was this idea of crafting authenticity, which is almost like adding the authentic style, like as a surface treatment. So like, I think that's definitely something that you see more. You see McDonald's brings out like a rustic burger, and that's like, it's not really the real deal, but it's in that vein of it becoming a trend. Right.
I was going to bring up food too, because to add that authenticity when it's not really.
And I think also, Dave, I've pulled out a few from Dave Coleman here, but ultimately the disciplines themselves are timeless and valuable. And I think that's true. When I first started, I think that was why the letterpress was so important to me, was because everything I saw on the screen suddenly had context. And then once you research further, you realize everything comes from writing. And that is such a rich history. It doesn't just go away, it comes in different forms.
Right. Okay, so Gemma, did you want to answer this question from Matthew, since it's somewhat in the same vein?
Oh, yes.
Okay, sure. So hand done type. Is it a trend or here to stay? Hand done type is huge right now because it's a refreshing break from the over-polished design / advertising. Across many industries, there's a trend for the custom handcrafted versus the commercial mass-produced. Everyone is trying to move into that space. Just observe how the food industry is reacting right now, like we just said. Do you view this as a trend that will soon be oversaturated and lose its soul and uniqueness?
Okay, excellent question. I think that part of the trend towards custom handcrafted has become a style. And I think that you were actually sharing, Rachel, a thing from Starbucks, which was using a font, but it was a font that was based on, a trending brush style. And I think that, something can be crafted and not actually have to be, crafty or show a brush stroke. It can be, you can have a beautiful piece of completely digitally created type that has attention to the detail, and that's obviously all the elements of typography. And I think that is what separates the trends, and brands will try and catch on. And if you get someone creating something that is just, a copy of a style, you can usually tell if you have this background in typography. But I think the difference is, for the wider world, how do you differentiate like a good piece of handwritten brush script versus a bad one? Because there's so many out there now. And I think another thing that's interesting is, when is it valuable to have it not looking as good? Like what I said with the Angus and Julia Stone thing, like when do you actually want it to look really handwritten? And what are the different spaces that I think the food industry, wine, alcohol, there's certain industries where this crafted feel fits. And then there's some industries that you never really want it to look like. You don't want like a bank or maybe a bank a little bit authentic, but you don't want a hospital like having you want some things to have slickness and like authority and to, speak to what they do, I think.
Right. Some of those industries are the small industries, which you want to have a handcrafted, like the Mass Brothers chocolate. I don't know if you know, but the Mass Brothers is a huge thing here in the US. And then there was some sort of parody about two brothers who were handcrafting water. They were making artisan water. It was so funny. But that just shows you, how funny this whole authentic trend is.
Yeah. Sure.
So do you feel like it will be oversaturated?
I think it already is oversaturated. I mean, maybe it's possible that I can't tell if that's because I have tunnel vision, in the sense that all of the Instagram accounts that I follow tend to be lettering or design focused, so I just see more of it. But I mean, if I think of when 10 years isn't a big period of time, but if I think of when I started being interested in typography, none of it existed. There was no Instagram, so I remember I Love Typography was the place that I would go to get all of my like typography news. And now it's just like there's so many resources. I think in some ways that's good, and in some ways it means that, yes, there is like an oversaturation.
Right. Okay. Matthew, I hope we answered your question. Okay. Should we get to the next of our questions? The third one is the future of communication shifting towards verbal forms? What does this mean for the written word? Will there finally be a way to match a font to your voice? Wow, that's a good question. Okay, so guys, we want to hear from you. Is the future of communication shifting towards verbal forms? What does this mean for the written word? Will there finally be a way to match a font to your voice? So let's hear what you guys have to say. It's going to take a little bit, but I noticed that a lot of the user interface is starting to go to voice, like the Amazon Echo and Siri and whatnot. I'm wondering what's going to happen to the written word once we do that. Yes, Paula, we'll post some of the Instagram accounts that we're talking about.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. So Michael says it's shifting to VR. Virtual reality.
Yeah. So, I mean, what does virtual reality mean for, I guess if you think of reading, if you think of the way that the screen changed the way that we read from, like this to like this.
Right.
What are we going to be reading a book like around like this? No, I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting to see what's going to happen, especially with the voice thing. Is that just going to be for the daily communication of, I need to go here, send a message to John, that sort of basic thing? Will that mean that when you do have a written form of communication, it becomes more valuable or more luxurious, or you spend more time on it? Here we go.
I wonder.
Visual communication will always add value that verbal communication cannot. And then
Come
in
on,
the other
Eric.
way, the opposite of that is that verbal communication can always add value in ways that visual communication cannot. You know, I can't do this, you know, when
Right.
I'm writing, but you could choose a font or you could design it in a way that has that same energy.
Right. Bernardo, what is oral typefaces? I don't like the idea of voice in public spaces loses the privacy of some communications. I guess it depends on the environment, right? In what context. Yeah.
That's true.
Great answers, guys. Shall we go to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that. Okay. What do you think the democratization of design tools means for professional designers? Oh, I have something to say about this. Will really good lettering and typography become a luxury? So let's hear it from you guys. What do you think the democratization of design tools means for professional designers? Will really good lettering and typography become a luxury? You know, I have to wonder about this. There's all sorts of like typography apps that for Instagram, right? That, oh, put typography on your photos. It's like, who's setting this stuff?
Well, I'm curious. Let's find those people. You know what I want to know? Who does the little designs of the like cities on Snapchat? Like when it comes up and there's like Sydney's made out of like seagulls or something.
That's right. It's the programmers, it's the app designers who are actually sort of, you know, branding our communication now. Oh my gosh. What do you guys think? Oh, we have nothing yet. Let's see.
That's okay. I think.
Okay,
the internal design team makes the Snapchats.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I wonder that about Adobe. Sorry, I know that Adobe is on the line, but you know, if we're all using the same design tools, does all our work look the same? I teach interactive design, and a lot of the apps are starting to look alike. So I wonder if it's because of the tools, Sketch, Adobe that we're using. Interesting. Anyone can design those design filters for Snapchat. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but
I'm
going to do one. Oh, this is interesting from Judith. I spend more time educating my clients how professional design and lettering is superior now and spend less time designing and more time managing clients. I think that's interesting and true. Like that is, you see those websites where it's like design your logo for $5 and you put it in and, what's the algorithm, like what's the ways that it's coming up with that? So it's like, what is the value of design thinking, I guess, and how can that make your work stand apart from a cookie cutter option?
There was an article about logos being designed by robots now. I found that so interesting.
Oh, yes. Well, I think one of the later questions is about that. I'm very curious about robots.
Okay, so let's see. Danielle says not necessarily. Musicians have used the same notes for centuries. Interesting. I think a pencil and paper have those infinite possibilities, especially when users are exploring from their own experience. That's great.
That's great, and it's amazing.
And it's also what's happened with photographers, right? I mean, now that everyone has a phone, a lot of photographers have actually not been able to do their work. But if you stand out and you say that's about the thinking, it's actually something human that I am doing as opposed to, using the same tools that everyone else. Great point, Danielle. Very good. Okay, so can I read the next one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, good. My background in lettering comes from a love of illustration and often involves creating words to be looked at. I'm curious to hear from designers who set long-form copy or design fonts for reading. Have there been any key trends over the last 10 years as we move to digital? As we read more on our phones, is it the big tech companies that are shaping what fonts we read most? Wow, that's a good one. Okay, so the question again is, have there been any key trends over the last 10 years as we move into digital? As we read more on our phones, do the big tech companies, are they shaping what fonts we read most? What do you guys think? I actually think so.
Well, I think it's inevitable, and we're really, because the big tech companies are shaping lots of things. but you know, that was the quote that I remember when I was studying. You read best what you read most, and that's when you have these book fonts and like, you know, what is it, the ways that you read easiest. But nowadays, if it is, you know, these digital spaces that we're working in, or if Apple releases an iPhone and then what are the default fonts, you know, and everyone has that, it automatically, you know, facilitates what you read most.
Right, right. So what do you guys think? For better, for worse, Dave says. I do think, yeah, Judith says big distribution companies, I think, have a huge influence on what's popular. And I actually think that's always been sort of the case. I mean, even though we've all have a say on social media and we have these tools like this webinar, for example, and YouTube, whatnot, I still don't know if we can reach mass appeal to make a huge difference. I don't know. That's just my opinion. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Nikita's got another great point here.
What is it?
I think big name companies set certain trends, but those trends become popular because those companies are so big and everyone looks to them for what's cool. Or I think also it's like in the sense that, you know, where do the trends come from? They're looking to all sorts of different places for, you know, the trends in different styles and that sort of thing.
Right. You know, and there's more fonts that are sold now than there has ever been. I mean, we can pick from 300,000 fonts. It's crazy.
And Bernardo, yes.
Go ahead. You do it.
Okay, playing devil's advocate here. That's not devil's advocate. That's what this is, a discussion. How about the boom of smaller foundries or independent type designers that break the mold? And that's like, I think that's the other side of, you know, globalization and being able to be so connected, is that it does allow these people who are doing something really, really well and doing it uniquely to have a voice. And for the people who seek that out, like, I think that's really awesome.
Right.
And Veronica, Google Fonts tapping into, oh yeah, so the big companies are tapping into the smaller companies.
That's true. And I guess that is what's happening in most industries, right? Where it's not just ours.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I just had a drink with a friend, and they were saying that some of the small breweries here in Los Angeles are actually owned by the largest breweries, you know, that they're just creating these small little craft breweries to make them look craft, but they're not. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll just keep going. We don't have that many left, so don't worry. We're not going to be here all night, people. Let's see. All right, how has social media shaped the world of typography and lettering? Do trends move faster? Why do we like watching movies like live calligraphy or prefer images with a human touch in them? So let us know, guys. How has social media shaped the world of type and lettering? Do trends move faster? Why do we like watching movies of live calligraphy or prefer images with a hand or human in them? So you're talking about like Seb Lester.
Yeah,
right?
like Seb Lester, but I think also there's, you know, so many of the Instagram accounts that are like, you know, curated, you know, pulling from different sources of letterers and calligraphers and typographers. And I think that on Instagram and many of the other socials, you just see the same style like spread like wildfire. And
yeah.
I mean, this is actually also, I might just respond to one of the questions that was in the topic section, which was about, I think it was about like styles being like stolen or appropriated of your work. Hold on, let me just have a look.
Can you, tell me which one it is here?
I can't actually.
Oh, is it the first one? The design with art thieves?
How do you personally deal with art thieves? I guess I'll answer this in relation to the trends and we can look at the answers. But I mean, I personally, like, people send me like a private message, like, look, Gemma, like, this is exactly the same. And to be honest, like, often, like, it doesn't bother me unless it's like a brand or someone using it. If it's someone learning or if it's a student, then like I understand. I mean, like, you kind of learn by like copying something that you like. But I think it's only, you know, becomes problematic when it's for commercial use or if it's a big brand stealing your ideas. But I think for me personally is when I start to see something spread or become really popular, it's almost like a challenge to innovate. It's a challenge to be like, okay, that's a thing now, what's next? Or someone's using that of mine and I'm gonna find something that's new or that's different or that hasn't been done before. So I think that's a really good way to look at it. And also, like, we live in a time when, like, even you sometimes don't know if you've come up with the idea or if you've seen it, And it's so easy to like, I mean, you think you've come up with something, you Google it, exists. It's because of this connection. It's really like, you know, it's everything's up for grabs. So you have to do what you do really well and keep on trying to see what's next.
Right. Great. Okay, so we've got some answers coming in. Yeah, Terry says, as Gemma said, we appreciate what humans are capable of, even if, or especially when we can't do it.
Imperfection is a big draw in video.
It
More
is.
emotion in hand drawn. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
It's like if I post a picture of like a mural where there's like a tiny bit that's not complete and there's a ladder in the shot, it'll get like twice as many likes.
Oh, really? Oh,
it's something about the process or behind, I don't know what it is, but it's, I even like looking at pictures like that as well. So it's, yeah.
Maybe we're so used to looking at the glossy photos, everything being perfect. So then there's something out of place. We go, oh, wait, that catches our eyes. Yeah. It's just pure contrast, right? I feel like watching the videos of people hand lettering like Seb Lester and, you know, those calligraphy ones. I think that just appeals to our lizard brain. You know, the bus stop painting. We're like, it doesn't even have to be beautiful. We just love watching paint go on pavement. There's something about that viscerality, you know, the physical.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like the viscerality of the paint. And then there's also like the wonder of a human, you know, like the ability and the skill. And I think probably there's a book called The Art Instinct, and it's about like human evolution and this idea of being attracted to like skill because it, you know, it shows that you have dedication or commitment. So maybe there's part of that, like knowing that even though it looks really easy, that there's this time that's gone into it, making it look so effortless. People don't always respect the process, but it's fun to see how individuals solve problems, infuse their idiosyncrasies into the perfect technique. That's great.
I know. I also think that watching those movies provides a surprise. You don't really know what it's going to look like at the end. So it's suspenseful.
Totally.
I love this. Nelson says, also, old English fonts are back with a vengeance. They kind of are.
And Teresa, you can see this with food, with more options being pointed towards organic and locally sourced. And also that just made me think also the calligraphy videos, but then also the food videos of the like making a recipe and you see all the ingredients. Like there's something about watching that, which is the same world of like, you just want to watch.
It's so odd.
Cool.
Okay. Yes, let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the movie Her, there is a service for handwritten letters, which are conceived by a human, but written by a robot. Let's talk about this. What's the point in robotic handwriting? Oh, I saw something like that online, I think. Will there be a point where handwriting robots are so good they're indistinguishable from a human version? What do you guys think? So what's the point of robotic handwriting? Will there be a point where handwriting robots are so good that they are indistinguishable from a human version? I hope not, says Zachary. You know, that would have maybe helped with your sign project, Gemma.
Well, yeah, I actually really like the idea of a hand, like, you know, I mean, there's lots of robots that exist in that video. I mean, the one I showed you of the calligraphy one in Germany, and there's lots out there, but I'm just curious of like what for, other than like curiosity or art. You know what I mean? Because if you were gonna, like in the movie Her, when they're sending these handwritten heartfelt letters, I mean, if you received something and you knew, you would know that it was not written by a person. Does it even matter? Would you still get the same meaning from something typed out? Yes, Bond. Thank you, Bernardo. I actually met one of the guys from Bond that are creating robots that write by hand. I used to do film production with them. It's a scary and exciting technology. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they do. From the stuff that I briefly had a look, at this point, I feel like it's still not like, you know, not indistinguishable. It feels like it's a process, but I mean, it is inevitable. If you think about how many individual people have different handwriting, it's the same as like designing a robot that has different personalities almost.
Right.
You know.
So Bernardo, why do you think it's scary? Why are robots thought of as scary? So, right? I mean, basically, if it's a human who designs it, if it's a human who designs it and designs the look and puts in the programming, what's the difference between these robotic handwriting robots as opposed to like printers, commercial printers? We design everything, we send it out, or you send it to your Epson or whatnot, and it prints it out. So it's the machine
they're
that's
outsourcing our jobs. But yeah, I mean, I wonder if people like watching videos of robots writing calligraphy versus Seb Lester. Now there's an art installation. The robot versus Seb Lester. I think like in terms of like, if you think of time and saving, I mean, imagine the monks who had to handwrite, and like for them, they'd be like, this is amazing. It's like this similar of a computer. But yeah, Veronica, can a robot use calligraphy to express and create meaning? Exactly. I'll tell you when we should be scared is when the robot, you train it to do one thing, then it starts writing like its own poem. Then we should be freaking out.
Then we will get back online and we'll have another discussion about that. So it is kind of scary, I guess. Okay, let's.
Dave Coleman says that's cute. I think it would be cute. Cool.
Okay, let's do the last of your question, because the very last one I put into as a poll. But I'm curious to hear from type designers about the future of designing fonts. What parts of this process could be easily automated, and what parts of the process rely on human design decisions? So for those of you guys, I know Bernardo actually designs type. I'm curious to hear from type designers about the future of designing fonts. What parts of this process could be easily automated, and what parts of the process rely on human design decisions? Nelson's asking a totally different question, a totally different webinar is going to be about, are designing fonts lucrative? Veronica says, hi, David. Apparently there are greeting card companies doing such.
Oh, that's the handwritten robots. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I guess it doesn't have to only apply to type designers, but I was just thinking about that process because obviously there's the initial creative stage where you're coming up with, what am I designing? What's it based on? You have to know the history of the typography or the basis of, what style you're working within, which I think is the design thinking. And then, in terms of there's probably, the spacing and all those sides of it that can be sped up by working digitally. Right. But what is it like, as in the same way that a robot's just going to go write a poem, could a robot design, like, could you put enough inputs in there that it could say, like, we want to bring out a new sans serif style that's like, a little bit friendly, a little bit, you can put in all these attributes, and could you, essentially teach it to design in a similar way? But I think that will be the last thing that'll be automated. That's what they say. Creativity and empathy are the hardest things for robots to do.
Right. But you're saying to program in those parameters, and the robot can design in between those. Yes.
In the same way that you search, if you're searching for a font, and you could put in some words and it might show you. Yeah.
Right. That's another discussion.
Here's an answer. There are elements of the type design process that can be automated for sure. And it's interesting because a lot of younger type designers have access to font editors that encourage more automation in certain areas than what editors and software a year ago did. That's true. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's also a positive in terms of the democratization of access to software and designing things, is that for younger generations, there is that opportunity for experimentation that's not limited by access to, different software.
Victoria says, fully automated kerning would be great. I have to agree. You have to hand kern everything, but sometimes it just gets tiring.
Surely someone's working on that.
Nikita says yes. Oh, that's great. We've got a lot of people saying. Great. Okay. And then lastly, we have a poll under the polls tab. Actually, let me just check here.
Yes, Bernardo said something.
Oh, okay.
I think you said before that Bernardo is a type designer, yeah? There is lots of programming automation in type design, like applying accents or interpolating weights. Some are experimenting with more automation. Letter array is a good example of this. Some are experimenting with automating other aspects like spacing. But in the end, nothing beats the human eye. It's great.
That's great. Nothing beats the human eye in anything creative. Okay, so we have a poll underneath. there's a tab called polls. We asked you, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of writing, design, lettering, and typography? And this whole time it's been optimistic. And then while I was sitting here, it just turned, someone voted pessimistic. Who is it?
It was when we started talking about the poetic robot.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh,
awesome. I like, too much pessimistic. This is great.
Oh, very funny. Okay, so we have a couple minutes left, if that's okay with you, Gemma. We'll answer some of the questions that have been voted up. And thank you, everyone, for giving us some feedback. It really, really helps. And it's a great topic, Gemma. I mean, it's
thank you. Really, this is like, I just want to say now, thank you to everyone, or even just in the comments, I'm going to go back and read them all. And it's just always good to, you know, you sit by yourself in your studio and you think, oh, this is what's happening. You're like, wait, is that just me? So it's really great to hear from other people working in different areas that I'm not specializing in, and just to see what, you know, your experiences are. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so Gosia has a question. Hi, Gemma. Just wondering whether you had a mentor when you started your career, or if you've ever mentored someone.
I never had like a formal mentor where I sought out, you know, a mentor officially. But when I did learn to set type by hand in the letterpress studio, I had a tutor who was doing his PhD in Australian printing histories. So he was like a wealth of knowledge when I was first starting out. So I think that in terms of a typography mentor, was probably the first person who gave me guidance. But in terms of like my career from that point forward, I've just been like taking it as it comes. And I haven't ever mentored anyone before, no.
Okay, great. Alessandro is asking, typography is writing with prefabricated letters. Will writing be human, or perhaps do you mean the future of type design? I think you sort of addressed this one a little bit. I touched on this in terms of like the terminology in my talk, but I also think I'm curious to see how this terminology will change, and how what each of them mean, how these lines might be blurred. Because if you think about, you know, if you know, just all these things we've been talking about, like a handwritten robot, and if you then took each of those letters and turned it into a font, and then I just think in terms of, the topic that I'm talking about, the future of typography, as I said before, is encompassing all of these elements, and how they interplay and change is actually an interesting part of the discussion. So I hope that doesn't, yes, but I understand that it might be confusing how I'm saying the future of typography is human. Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, do you still have another minute or two, or shall we wrap it up?
Yeah. Let's have one more.
Okay, let's do one more. Okay, so Zachary is asking, when you are starting your type concept, are you working at all from stenciled lettering, or do you strictly freehand?
Is this like all project? Oh, I guess he can't really answer because he's in the thing. In terms of like every concept, I guess I'll answer in terms of the process, because it's pretty much the same. If it's
Zachary's
like,
here is what he said. He said,
I'm
here.
here. Hi, Zachary. I was just wondering if you were referring specifically to like murals, or if it's all of my work.
Let's see what he says.
I'll answer in general and move on to my murals anyway, just in case, just for time's sake. But, you know, usually if it's coming from like a advertising brief or a project where they've got samples from my work and it's heavily art directed, it's very much a matter of like, these are the styles we like, we're going to recreate that. When there's more of an opportunity for exploration from my part, I usually spend like the first part of the research either looking at existing design work or existing fonts in the right realm. Like I'll just look and kind of get a sense, maybe narrow it down. Then I'll, depending on the time that there is for the project. So if it's more of like a short deadline and it's more about the illustration, I might use an existing font and then add illustration or customize. But if it's more for an exhibition or where I want it to be more unique, my own, I'll spend the time kind of building up the lettering and working by hand. And as I said before, scanning all the elements back in. So it's definitely a combination of using existing, you know, fonts, or exactly working by hand. And with the calligraphy side as well, with the brush style, that's obviously, I do that by hand. I don't really do any sketching before. I just move straight into, if it's ink, I like to move straight into the medium that it's going to be finally, because I feel like you have more ability to, you know, experiment.
And the energy in your letters makes a huge difference. I mean, you can't just plan that out.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm so sorry that we can't answer everyone's questions, but I do appreciate everyone helping out with Gemma's questions.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone.
And Gemma, you're going to be speaking soon at a couple different places. You want to tell us a little bit where we can find you?
Yes, I have a few. So in September, I think it's around the 22nd of September, I'll be in Antwerp for Off by Night. Then in October, I will be doing the AIGA Design Conference in Las Vegas. And then in November 2nd and 3rd and 4th, I will be in San Diego for Adobe Max. So Adobe Max this is actually going to be a lot of the kind of background to my talk, because I think it's an hour and 20 minutes. So I really want to like flesh out these ideas.
It's a long talk.
It's a long time, guys. There'll be lots of videos. But yeah, so come along. That would be awesome. And if you, I think we said before, Rachel, I'm going to try and answer a few of the extra questions in one of the emails that goes out as well. So if there's something else that is a burning question, I can try and respond to that too.
Okay, great. So if you guys have any other questions and please vote them up too while you're still here, then Gemma will answer them she won't have a robot write it out, but she'll write it out herself, I'm sure. I do want to ask though, for those of you who are watching the replay, I know you're here live and it's going to be sort of robotic to sound like, oh, you're watching the replay. But if you're watching the replay and you have any answers to the questions, please put them into the chat, because Gemma will come back to this replay and take a look at the answers, and hopefully she will help fuel her talk. So really appreciate, Gemma, for you spending some time in talking to us about the future of typography. And thank you everybody here for giving us some feedback. Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope you guys get some sleep. I know some of you are up late at night just to watch this.
So staying up, everyone.
Thanks, Gemma. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you. Have a good one.